The crimson sand of Kari's 7 stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by jagged rock formations that jutted from the desert floor like the bones of some ancient titan. Captain Marcus Rivera wiped sweat from his forehead as he surveyed the wreckage of his cargo transport, its hull split open like a discarded shell after the solar storm had torn through his navigation systems and sent him spiraling toward this forgotten world. "Well, Marcus," he muttered to himself, checking the power levels on his emergency beacon, "you've certainly outdone yourself this time." The beacon showed minimal range, maybe 50 kilometers in the best conditions. His water supply would last 6 days if he rationed carefully, 7 if he pushed dangerously close to dehydration. The ship's emergency rations were intact, but without water, food became academic. He'd survived worse odds during his years running cargo through the outer systems, but never on a planet this thoroughly hostile to human life. The heat shimmer rising from the sand made distance impossible to judge, turning the horizon into a wavering mirage that promised water where none existed. Marcus had been walking for nearly 4 hours, searching for anything salvageable from his scattered cargo, when he noticed the tracks. They were subtle, just slight depressions in the sand that caught shadows differently than the surrounding dunes. Too small for the massive predators his ship's sensors had detected during the crash approach, too delicate for scavengers. Someone else was out here, and from the irregular spacing and depth variations, they were struggling. Marcus followed the trail with growing concern, his engineer's mind automatically cataloging the story the tracks told: stumbling gait, frequent stops, a pattern that suggested someone fighting exhaustion and losing. The trail led toward a cluster of boulder formations that offered the only shade visible in this section of desert. He found her collapsed behind the largest rock, curled in what little shadow the massive stone provided. At first glance, Marcus thought she might be human, the basic body structure was familiar enough. But as he approached, details emerged that marked her as something far more exotic. Her skin held a luminescent quality that seemed to glow even through the dirt and dehydration, and her ears tapered to elegant points that caught the harsh desert light. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow and rapid. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her dark hair matted with sand and sweat. The clothing she wore, though torn and stained, showed intricate craftsmanship that suggested nobility or wealth, delicate fabric that probably cost more than Marcus earned in a year of cargo runs. But what struck him most were her hands. Small, graceful, and clutched around an empty water container that explained everything about her condition. Marcus knelt beside her without hesitation, uncapping his precious water flask. He'd done the math on his survival margins, knew exactly how much each sip cost him in terms of longevity. But looking at this young woman dying slowly in the desert, the calculations seemed irrelevant. "Hey," he said softly, supporting her head as he brought the flask to her lips. "Easy now. Small sips." Her eyes fluttered open, violet irises that seemed to contain depths of starlight, and fixed on his face with desperate gratitude. She drank slowly, each swallow clearly an effort, while Marcus monitored her condition with the practical concern of someone who treated dehydration before. "Better?" he asked when she'd managed several careful sips. She nodded weakly, her voice barely a whisper when she spoke. Why?" "Because you needed it," Marcus replied simply, helping her sit up against the boulder. "Can you tell me your name? How you got here?" The young woman studied his face with those remarkable violet eyes, and Marcus felt as though she was seeing something in him that he hadn't known existed. When she spoke again, her voice carried musical undertones that made the desert air seem less harsh. "Kira, she said, the name carrying syllables that didn't quite fit human pronunciation patterns. "And you are the kindest stranger I have ever encountered." Marcus offered her another sip of water, noting how her color was already improving. "Marcus Rivera. And I'm probably the only stranger you're likely to encounter on this particular rock. What's someone like you doing stranded in the middle of nowhere?" Kira expression grew complex, gratitude mixed with something that might have been shame or fear. "I was running," she admitted quietly. "From duty, from expectations, from a life that was chosen for me rather than one I chose for myself." Well, Marcus said, settling into the shade beside her and checking the position of the sun, it looks like you found quite an effective place to hide. Unfortunately, it's also quite an effective place to die. How long have you been without water? 2 days, she replied, accepting another careful sip from his flask. My escape didn't go as planned. Marcus did rapid calculations in his head. 2 days of dehydration in this heat should have killed her, yet she was recovering faster than seemed medically possible. Either her species was remarkably resilient, or there was more to her story than simple flight from unwanted responsibility. Escape from what? He asked, though part of him suspected he might not want to know the answer. Kira violet eyes grew distant, as though she was seeing across vast distances of space and memory. From a marriage that would save my people's kingdom and destroy my soul. The way she said it, with resigned acceptance rather than dramatic flair, told Marcus that her situation was far more complicated than a simple case of royal rebellion. But those were problems for after they figured out how to survive the next few days. Well, princess, he said, earning a startled look that confirmed his guess about her status, running away is only effective if you live long enough to enjoy your freedom. Right now, our biggest problem is staying alive until someone finds us. Kira expression shifted from surprise to something approaching hope. You would help me? Even knowing who I am? Marcus looked at her, young, beautiful, clearly from a world far more advanced than anything in his experience, probably important enough that helping her could complicate his life in ways he couldn't imagine. Then he thought about her collapsed in the sand, dying alone in an endless desert, and realized the choice had never really been in question. Princess or pauper, he said, offering her the flask again, nobody deserves to die alone. Besides, 2 people have better survival odds than 1, and something tells me you're tougher than you look. As if to prove his point, Kira managed a smile that transformed her entire face, turning exhausted desperation into something radiant enough to make the desert heat seem bearable. Yes, she said softly, her musical voice carrying undertones of something that sounded suspiciously like devotion. I believe we will survive this, Marcus Rivera. Together. The makeshift shelter Marcus had constructed from salvaged ship panels and emergency fabric provided blessed relief from ISci's punishing sun, but it also created an intimacy that made conversation inevitable. Princess Kira sat cross-legged on the thermal blanket, her recovery remarkable enough to make Marcus reconsider everything he knew about alien physiology. So, he said, checking their water levels with the grim precision of someone whose life depended on accurate accounting, princess of what, exactly? The Zarathi Star Empire, she replied, her musical voice carrying notes of both pride and sadness. 7 systems, 43 inhabited worlds, and approximately 12 billion subjects who are about to descend into civil war because their princess decided to be selfish. Marcus paused in his inventory calculations. 12 billion people affected by your marriage plans? That's quite a dowry negotiation. Kira laugh held no humor. The marriage isn't about love, Marcus. It's about preventing 2 powerful houses from tearing the empire apart. Lord Commander Zethvar controls the military. Duke Aaron commands the merchant fleets. Their families have been maneuvering for the throne since my father's death 3 years ago. And marrying one of them solves this how? By uniting their claims through my bloodline, she explained, unconsciously touching what Marcus now recognized as royal insignia woven into her clothing's fabric. Whichever man I marry becomes heir to the throne. The other is supposed to accept this gracefully and step aside for the greater good. Marcus handed her a portion of emergency rations, noting how she examined the human food with scientific curiosity before attempting to eat it. But you don't think they'll play along? I know they won't. I've seen the intelligence reports my advisors thought I was too delicate to handle. Zethvar has been stockpiling weapons and recruiting mercenaries. Aaron has been manipulating trade routes to create artificial shortages that increase dependence on his shipping networks. They're not planning to unite the empire, they're preparing to divide it between themselves after eliminating any potential rivals. Including you. Kira violet eyes met his with startling directness. Especially me. Royal bloodlines are only useful until they become inconvenient. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert's approaching night cycle. So you decided to remove yourself from the equation entirely. I thought if I disappeared, they'd be forced to find another solution. Maybe even negotiate directly instead of using my marriage as a political football. She sighed, her luminescent skin dimming slightly with exhaustion. I underestimated their commitment to the original plan. They came after you. Raiders, she confirmed. Supposedly independent pirates, but their ships were too well armed and their tactics too coordinated for random criminals. They disabled my escort vessel and started boarding procedures. I managed to reach an escape pod, but escape pods aren't designed for long-term survival, Marcus finished. Especially not on planets like this. As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of engines echoed across the desert, distant but unmistakable. Marcus immediately began breaking down their shelter while Kirillin peered toward the horizon with an expression of growing alarm. How many ships, he asked, stuffing equipment into his emergency pack with practiced efficiency. 3. Small attack craft, probably scouting for my pod's crash site. She stood gracefully despite her recent ordeal, and Marcus noticed how she moved with unconscious authority even in crisis. They'll have sensor equipment capable of detecting our body heat signatures. Then we need to move. Now. Marcus shouldered his pack and checked his sidearm, a standard projectile weapon that would be laughably inadequate against military-grade spacecraft but might discourage ground pursuit. Any suggestions for where to run in an endless desert? Kirillin studied the landscape with eyes that seemed to catalog details Marcus couldn't perceive. There, she said, pointing toward a cluster of rock formations that rose from the sand like ancient towers. Those structures aren't natural. If I'm right about this planet's history, they might offer more than simple shelter. They moved across the sand with desperate urgency, the sound of approaching engines growing steadily louder. Marcus found himself impressed by Kirillin's stamina. Whatever recovery capabilities her species possessed were clearly superior to human norms, because she matched his pace without apparent strain despite her recent dehydration. Marcus, she said as they approached the rock formations, which were indeed revealing themselves to be artificial structures weathered by centuries of desert storms, I need you to understand something about StoRyI customs. Can it wait until we're not being hunted by armed mercenaries? It's related to our survival. She caught his arm, her touch surprisingly strong. When you gave me water, you saved my life. By StoRyI law and tradition, that creates a sacred bond. I am now your sworn companion until the debt is repaid. Marcus stopped running, staring at her in the fading light. You're what? It means I'm bound to protect you with my life, to share your dangers, to place your welfare above my own safety. Her violet eyes held depths of sincerity that made Marcus realize she wasn't speaking metaphorically. It means I belong to you now, Marcus Rivera, until honor is satisfied. Before Marcus could process the full implications of this declaration, the ancient structures around them began responding to Kirillin's presence. Carved symbols along the weathered walls started glowing with soft bioluminescence, and what had appeared to be solid stone revealed hidden doorways that Iris opened at her approach. Definitely not natural, Marcus observed, following her into passages that extended deep into the rock formation. And definitely connected to your people somehow. StoRyI colony ruins, Kirillin confirmed, her voice echoing strangely in the crystalline corridors. This planet was abandoned 5 centuries ago when climate change made it uninhabitable. But the emergency systems are still functional. The passages led to a vast underground chamber filled with technology that made Marcus's cargo transport look like a child's toy. Ancient StoRyI engineering hummed with patient power, waiting for commands that hadn't come in half a millennium. Emergency shelter, water reclamation, even basic medical facilities, Kirillin explained, activating systems with gestures that suggested intimate familiarity with the technology. We can wait here until the raiders give up their search. Marcus watched her work, noting how the alien technology responded to her presence like it recognized royal authority even after centuries of dormancy. "You're full of surprises, princess." "As are you," she replied, turning to face him with an expression that made Marcus suddenly aware of how alone they were in this place that time had forgotten. Most beings would have demanded payment for their kindness. You offered water to a dying stranger and asked for nothing in return. The sound of engines had faded, suggesting the raiders had moved their search elsewhere, but the intimacy of their refuge made the outside world seem very far away. In the soft glow of ancient StoRyI technology, Kirillin looked like something from a dream. Beautiful, otherworldly, and gazing at Marcus with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. "It was just water," he said quietly. "No," she replied, moving closer with the fluid grace that marked all her movements, "it was everything. It was the choice to value another being's life above your own survival. It was kindness without expectation of reward." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "It was the moment I realized that royal blood means nothing compared to a good heart." Outside, the desert wind howled through the ancient ruins, but inside their crystalline sanctuary, Marcus felt something shift between them, something that had nothing to do with debt or custom and everything to do with two souls recognizing something precious in each other. The ancient StoRyI ruins revealed their secrets slowly, each chamber unlocked by Kirillin's touch offering glimpses into a civilization that had abandoned this world before Marcus's species had achieved interstellar flight. Water reclamation systems hummed to life after centuries of dormancy, while bioluminescent panels cast ethereal light through corridors carved from living crystal. "Your people built all this?" Marcus asked, examining technology that operated on principles he couldn't begin to understand. "Then just left. Climate shift happened faster than anyone anticipated," Kirillin explained, activating what appeared to be a historical archive. "The twin suns entered an unstable phase, increasing solar radiation beyond our environmental shield's capacity. The evacuation took 3 years, but my ancestors hoped the planet might recover eventually. Holographic displays showed the world as it once was. Lush gardens replacing the current desert, crystal cities where now only sand remained, a thriving civilization that had vanished into history." Marcus found himself studying images of StoRyI families, noting how similar Kirillin looked to the ancient recordings despite the centuries between them. "They were beautiful," he said softly. "They were my people," she replied, her musical voice carrying undertones of loss. "And now their descendant hides in their ruins, running from responsibilities they would have faced with courage." Marcus turned from the historical displays to study her profile in the shifting light. "You think saving 12 billion people from civil war is running away? I think refusing an arranged marriage because I wanted to choose my own path is remarkably selfish, given the consequences." "Or remarkably human," Marcus suggested. "The desire for self-determination isn't selfishness, princess. It's the foundation of every civilization worth preserving." Kirillin's violet eyes met his with surprise. "Your species values individual choice above collective stability? When we're at our best? Yes. Though we don't always live up to that ideal." Marcus settled beside her on a bench that had been carved from single piece of crystal, noting how the ancient architecture seemed designed to encourage intimate conversation. "But I've seen what happens when people are forced into roles they never chose. It doesn't usually end well for anyone involved." The archive continued cycling through images of pre-evacuation life, showing celebrations, artistic achievements, and what appeared to be StoRyI families choosing their own bonds of partnership rather than having them dictated by political necessity. "Even your ancestors seem to value love over arrangement," Marcus observed, pointing to a hologram showing what was clearly a voluntary bonding ceremony. "Those were different times," Kirillin said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Before empires and political alliances, when the choice of one person couldn't affect billions of others. Maybe. Or maybe empires are only as strong as the happiness of the people who comprise them." Their philosophical discussion was interrupted by proximity alarms throughout the ancient facility. The raiders had returned, and this time they'd brought ground-penetrating sensors capable of detecting life signs through meters of solid rock. "Emergency protocols," Kirillin said, moving to what appeared to be a command console. "The facility can seal itself, but not indefinitely. If they're determined enough, they'll dig us out eventually," Marcus finished. "How long can these systems maintain life support?" "Days, maybe weeks." "But Marcus." She turned to face him, her expression carrying the weight of difficult truth. "There's something I haven't told you about why they're so persistent in hunting me." Before she could elaborate, the facility's communication systems activated, projecting a holographic image that made Kirillin's luminescent skin pale with recognition. The figure was tall, imposing, and wearing military dress that marked him as high-ranking Zorathi nobility. "Princess Kirillin," the projection said in a voice that carried absolute authority, "I am Lord Commander Zethvar. Your disappearance has caused considerable concern throughout the Empire." "More like opportunity," Kirillin whispered, but she stepped forward to address the hologram directly. "Lord Commander. I assume your concern extends to personally leading hunting parties. The Empire requires stability, Princess. Your wedding to Duke Aaron will provide that stability. These romantic notions of personal choice are luxuries we can no longer afford." Marcus noticed how Zethvar's eyes never quite met Kirillin's image, suggesting the communication wasn't truly two-way. But the commander's next words made both of them realize their situation had become far more desperate. "However, I understand that your experiences on this hostile world may have affected your judgment. When we retrieve you, the Duke has graciously agreed to overlook any compromising situations that may have developed during your disappearance." The implication was clear and insulting enough to make Marcus's hands clench into fists. Kirillin's reaction was more controlled but equally furious. Her luminescent skin actually brightened with what appeared to be anger-induced bioluminescence. "Compromising situations," she repeated, her musical voice gaining harmonics that made the crystal walls resonate sympathetically. "The Duke recognizes that survival sometimes requires adaptations that would be unacceptable under normal circumstances. Rest assured that your purity of bloodline remains the primary concern." The transmission ended, leaving them alone in the ancient chamber with the implications of Zethvar's words. Marcus felt anger building in his chest, not just at the casual dismissal of Kirillin's agency, but at the suggestion that her association with him somehow contaminated her worth. "Charming fellow," he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Really makes the case for arranged marriage." "Marcus," Kirillin said quietly, "there's something you need to understand about Zorathi noble bloodlines. Let me guess, genetic purity, royal inheritance, the usual aristocratic nonsense. More complicated than that." She moved closer, her violet eyes searching his face as though looking for something specific. "Zorathi nobles possess certain capabilities that are enhanced by emotional bonds. The stronger the emotional connection, the more powerful the effect." Marcus felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. "That's why you recovered from dehydration so quickly. Why the ancient technology responds to you. Why you seem to understand my equipment instinctively. And why," she said, taking his hands in hers, "an arranged marriage would be not just personally devastating, but practically disastrous. Bonds forced by politics create weak resonance. But bonds forged by genuine connection." The crystal chamber around them began humming with harmonic frequencies, responding to whatever was happening between them. Marcus felt something electric in Kirillin's touch, a connection that went deeper than simple physical attraction. "The sacred debt I declared isn't just custom," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's the beginning of a bond that could make me more powerful than either Zethvar or Aaron anticipate. But only if it's genuine." "And is it?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer, in the way her presence made him feel more alive than he had in years of solitary cargo runs. "I offered myself to you when you gave me water," she replied, her luminescent skin casting prismatic patterns on the crystal walls. "Not because of debt or custom, but because I recognized something in your kindness that I'd never seen before. Something worth choosing freely rather than having it chosen for me. The sound of drilling equipment echoed through the facility's upper levels, reminding them that their refuge was temporary. But in the soft glow of ancient Zarathi technology, with Kirilin's hands warm in his own, Marcus realized that some choices transcend practical considerations. Then let's make sure they understand exactly what they're up against, he said, pulling her closer as the crystal chamber sang with harmonies that seemed to celebrate the bond forming between them. Outside, the raiders continued their assault on the ancient defenses, but inside the crystalline sanctuary, two souls were discovering that sometimes the most important revolutions begin with a simple act of kindness offered without expectation of reward. The ancient facility's defenses held for 3 days before the raiders' persistence finally breached the outer barriers. Marcus and Kirilin had used the time well, learning each other's stories while the Zarathi technology responded to their growing emotional connection with increasingly complex harmonic displays. But now, with drilling sounds echoing through the upper chambers, their refuge was becoming a trap. "Emergency beacon," Marcus said, checking his equipment one final time. "If we can reach the surface and get a clear signal, there's a chance someone might respond before Zetvar's people drag you back for your arranged wedding." "Marcus," Kirilin said, her violet eyes reflecting the crystal chamber's bioluminescent glow, "if rescue comes, what happens to us?" The question hung between them with the weight of impossible futures. Marcus had spent 3 days discovering that beneath Kirilin's royal bearing lay a brilliant, compassionate woman whose laughter could make ancient alien technology sing with joy. She'd learned that his gruff exterior concealed someone who'd chosen solitary cargo runs because previous relationships had taught him that caring too deeply only led to disappointment. "I don't know," he admitted. "You're a princess with the fate of 12 billion people depending on your decisions. I'm a cargo pilot with a damaged ship and no clear destination. The practical answer is that we go back to our separate lives and pretend this never happened." "And the impractical answer?" Marcus met her gaze, seeing in her luminescent features the reflection of something he'd thought he'd lost the capacity to feel. "The impractical answer is that I've fallen in love with you, and 3 days in an ancient ruin have shown me more happiness than I found in 10 years of wandering between star systems." Before Kirilin could respond, the facility's proximity alarms indicated multiple ships approaching from orbit. But these weren't the raiders' crude attack craft. The sensor readings showed vessels of a size and sophistication that could only mean one thing. "The Royal Fleet," Kirilin breathed, her expression cycling through hope, fear, and resignation. "They found us." The drilling sounds from above intensified as the raiders realized their time was running out. Within minutes, the chamber's ceiling began showing stress fractures from the assault, while outside, the deep rumble of spacecraft landings shook dust from ancient crystal formations. "Whatever happens," Marcus said, taking her hands as energy weapons fire echoed through the facility, "I want you to know that giving you water was the best decision I've ever made. Even knowing where it led us. Especially knowing where it led us." The chamber's ceiling finally gave way, but instead of raiders dropping through the breach, armored figures in Royal Zarathi military gear rappelled into the space with professional efficiency. Their leader removed his helmet, revealing features that marked him as high nobility, elongated ears adorned with rank insignia, skin that held the same luminescent quality as Kirilin's, and eyes that assessed the situation with calculated intelligence. "Princess Kirilin," he said with formal courtesy that couldn't quite conceal his relief, "I am Admiral Thaindor of the Royal Guard. Your safety has been our primary concern." "Admiral," she replied, straightening into the regal bearing Marcus had seen her practice during their time together. "I assume my disappearance has caused considerable diplomatic complications." "The understatement of the millennium, Your Highness. Lord Commander Zethvar and Duke Aaron have both mobilized their private fleets. They're claiming your disappearance proves you're unfit to rule and that emergency succession protocols should be activated." Marcus felt the weight of galactic politics crashing down on their crystalline sanctuary. In the space of minutes, Kirilin had transformed from the woman who'd laughed at his terrible jokes into a princess whose every decision could prevent or precipitate a civil war. "And the Royal Council's position?" she asked. "Divided, as always. But Your Highness. Admiral Thanedore's gaze flicked toward Marcus with barely concealed concern. Your prolonged absence in the company of an unknown alien has raised questions about the purity of your claim to the throne. Questions, Kirillin repeated, her voice gaining the harmonics that made the crystal walls resonate with dangerous frequencies, about my purity. Marcus stepped forward, his own anger overriding diplomatic caution. Admiral, Princess Kirillin's honor is beyond question. She's shown more courage and integrity in 3 days than most people demonstrate in a lifetime. The Admiral's expression shifted to something approaching surprise. You speak StoRyI honorifics with remarkable fluency for someone who just met our princess. He speaks them, Kirillin said quietly, because I taught them to him. Just as he taught me human concepts of individual choice and self-determination. She moved to stand beside Marcus, their shoulders touching in a gesture that was both protective and defiant. Admiral, I invoke my right as royal bloodline to declare a sacred bond. The chamber fell silent except for the harmonic humming of crystal formations responding to Kirillin's emotional state. Admiral Thanedore's expression cycled through shock, concern, and what might have been admiration. Your Highness, he said carefully, a sacred bond declaration would supersede all prior political arrangements. Including the proposed marriage alliance. I understand the implications perfectly. Kirillin took Marcus's hand, her touch sending harmonic resonances through the ancient technology that made the entire chamber glow with prismatic light. Captain Marcus Rivera saved my life when he could have preserved his own resources. He offered kindness without expectation of reward, compassion without calculation of advantage. By sacred law and personal choice, I declare him my bonded companion. Marcus felt the ceremonial words wash over him with almost physical weight, but his attention focused entirely on Kirillin's face, the mixture of determination and vulnerability that told him this choice was costing her everything she'd been raised to be. Princess, he said quietly, are you certain? Your people need you to prevent a war. Choosing me means. Choosing you means choosing love over politics, growth over stagnation, hope over fear. Her violet eyes held depths of starlight and absolute conviction. My people deserve a ruler who understands that true strength comes from bonds freely chosen, not obligations imposed by circumstance. Admiral Thanedore's comm unit chimed with incoming messages, undoubtedly reports of political chaos erupting throughout the StoRyI Empire as news of the princess's declaration spread through official channels. Your Highness, he said respectfully, this decision will change everything. Yes, Kirillin replied, her luminescent skin brightening with the bioluminescence that marked StoRyI resolve. It will change everything. And perhaps that's exactly what the Empire needs. The Admiral's comm unit continued chiming with increasingly urgent messages, but his attention remained fixed on the princess whose decision was reshaping the political landscape of 7-star systems in real time. Lord Commander Zethvar is demanding immediate audience, he reported. Duke Aaron is threatening to withdraw his fleets from frontier defense. The Royal Council is expressing concern about the constitutional implications. Let them express concern, Kirillin said, her voice carrying the authority that came with royal bloodline and absolute certainty. For too long, our empire has been governed by fear, fear of change, fear of choice, fear of allowing individuals to determine their own destinies. Perhaps it's time our leaders learned that true unity comes from willing cooperation, not forced compliance. Marcus squeezed her hand, feeling the harmonic resonance that flowed between them growing stronger as the ancient StoRyI technology responded to their emotional connection. Your Highness, what about the civil war? The 12 billion people depending on your marriage to unite the empire. Kirillin's smile held depths of wisdom that reminded Marcus she was royalty not just by birth, but by the intelligence and compassion that made her worthy of leadership. Marcus, my love, you've shown me something my advisors never considered. What if the solution isn't choosing between Zethvar and Aaron, but finding a third option that serves my people better than either political marriage could? Which is a ruler who demonstrates that strength comes from love freely given rather than alliances forced by necessity. A government that protects individual choice while serving collective good. An empire built on hope rather than fear. She turned to Admiral Thandor, her bearing regal despite the torn clothing and desert sand still clinging to her hair. Admiral, inform the Royal Council that Princess Kiralyn is returning to the capital. Not to fulfill an arranged marriage, but to claim her rightful place as heir to the throne. And Captain Rivera, the Admiral asked, though his tone suggested he already understood the answer. Comes with me as my bonded companion and equal partner in ruling an empire that desperately needs to remember the difference between authority and tyranny. The ancient crystalline chamber filled with harmonic frequencies that seemed to celebrate their declaration, while outside, the sound of spacecraft engines indicated that their rescue, and the beginning of their new life together, was about to commence. Marcus looked around the ruins that had sheltered their growing love, then at the woman whose simple request for water had become a vow that would reshape civilizations. Princess, are you ready for the galaxy to change? With you beside me? Kiralyn replied, her violet eyes reflecting starlight and infinite possibility. I'm ready for anything. As they walked hand in hand toward the surface and the future waiting beyond the stars, the ancient Zarathi ruins sang one final harmony. A crystalline benediction for two souls who had proven that sometimes the most important revolutions begin with the simplest acts of human kindness, freely given without expectation of reward.